corny old Christmas songs. There's a few hymns in there, some standards.
Few artists in music history have lived a life as wild, loud, and unforgettable as Rod Stewart. For decades, he ruled the charts with massive hits, packed arenas around the world, and a voice so recognizable that people instantly knew who was singing within seconds. But now, at 81 years old, one question is starting to follow him everywhere. How much longer can he really keep doing this? Behind the bright lights and legendary performances, there were moments when everything nearly collapsed. He almost lost the very voice that made him famous. He quietly battled a frightening health diagnosis away from the public eye. Even now, he still pushes himself hard enough that fans around him are starting to worry. As time keeps moving forward, many people are asking the same emotional question. Could 2026 finally be the year Rod Stewart steps away for good? And honestly, the answer is far more emotional than most fans expected. The rise of Rod Stewart is the kind of story that sounds almost unbelievable. He became one of the biggest icons rock music has ever seen. He had the unforgettable raspy voice, the flashy style, the wild hair, and hit songs that dominated generation after generation. Over the years, he sold more than 250 million records worldwide, performed in giant stadiums across the globe, and reached a level of fame where people only needed to hear the name Rod to know exactly who was being talked about. But behind all the fame, confidence, and chart-topping success is a side of his life most fans never fully knew about. The health scares, family struggles, backstage chaos, and private battles nearly pushed him over the edge more than once. Some of the things Rod survived behind closed doors would shock even longtime fans. Rod Stewart was born on January 10, 1945, in Highgate, North London. And even the story of his birth sounds dramatic enough to come from a movie. Just 30 minutes before he entered the world, a German V-2 rocket exploded near his family's home after striking a police station close to 507 Archway Road. World War II was still raging, and London was under constant fear and destruction. Rod Stewart literally came into the world surrounded by explosions and chaos. His parents, Rob and Elsie, originally planned to name him Rodney, but at the very last second, they changed their minds and named him Roderick instead. It may seem like a tiny detail now, but somehow it fits perfectly for a man who would later reinvent himself again and again throughout his long career, changing his style, image, and music whenever he wanted. Long before the mansions and fame, Rod struggled badly. One of his first jobs was working as a trainee at a wallpaper company. He hoped to become a silkscreen designer, but that dream crashed almost immediately after the company realized he was colorblind. He struggled to tell certain shades apart, making him completely unsuitable for the job. Just like that, his first career path disappeared. So Rod did whatever he could to survive. At one point, he even worked as a gravedigger, something very few future rock legends can say. During the early 1960s, he was arrested 3 different times while participating in campaign for nuclear disarmament marches. He believed strongly in what he was protesting and paid the price for it. At only 16 years old, Rod traveled to Paris with almost nothing. He busked on the streets and reportedly slept on the pavement beneath the Eiffel Tower. No fame, no money, no powerful connections. Just a teenager trying to survive while chasing a dream that probably seemed impossible at the time. Things did not get much easier in Spain either. While busking in Barcelona, Rod was arrested for being a vagrant. Imagine that for a second. A future global superstar getting thrown in jail simply because he was broke and sleeping rough on the streets. The first time he ever sang professionally was with Long John Baldry's Hoochie Coochie Men, but even that turned into chaos. Someone reportedly spiked his drink before a performance, and Rod spent nearly 45 minutes repeating the same 2 verses of a song over and over again. Somehow the band did not fire him afterward. Maybe they recognized how talented he was underneath all the madness. Or maybe the entire group was just as chaotic as he was at the time. The band toured around Britain in a battered old truck once used to deliver Bovril meat extract. The vehicle reportedly cost only £40 and was driven by a former RAF fighter pilot nicknamed Mad Harry. That was not exactly luxury touring. It sounded more like a disaster waiting to happen every single night. But once success arrived, it exploded fast. In 1972, Rod spent £89,000 on Cranbourne Court near Windsor, an enormous 36-room mansion bought from a lord-in-waiting connected to the Queen. Back then, that kind of purchase screamed one thing loud and clear: Rod Stewart had officially made it. Then in 1986, he reportedly outbid the King of Greece to buy another huge estate called Woodhouse in Epping for £1.2 million. Rod was living like a true rock superstar by that point. During the making of his Gasoline Alley album, producer Lou Reisner even gave him a Rolls-Royce as an advance instead of cash. Most artists asked for money. Rod Stewart asked for a luxury car instead. That confidence carried over into his music career too. With Maggie May, Rod became one of the very first artists ever to top both the singles chart and album chart at the same time in both the United Kingdom and the United States. That achievement turned him into a global phenomenon almost overnight. Even after becoming incredibly rich, Rod never completely lost touch with his working-class roots. He built a full-size football pitch at his Essex home because he remained obsessed with the sport he loved as a kid. And while some celebrities collect expensive paintings or rare jewelry, Rod became famous for another hobby entirely, his giant computerized model railway setup. Fans actually became fascinated by it. His original railway track reportedly even ran through an elaborate tunnel connected to his bedroom window. Many people found the hobby surprisingly wholesome and charming compared to the wild image he projected on stage. But the mansions, music, and hobbies only tell part of the story. Behind the public image of the flashy rocker wearing leopard print pants and performing in packed arenas was a personal life filled with heartbreak, controversies, emotional drama, and very public relationship battles. Rod Stewart lived just as loudly off stage as he did on stage, and some of those chapters became far messier than fans realized. Rod Stewart has never been shy when it came to romance. His songs overflow with passion, heartbreak, desire, and emotional pain because much of it came from real experiences in his own life. But behind the music was a personal life so complicated that tabloids followed it nonstop for decades. Rod went through multiple marriages, expensive divorces, and high-profile relationships that resulted in 8 children with 5 different women. His love life was constantly making headlines, and even fans admitted things sometimes became extremely chaotic. One thing nobody could ever accuse Rod Stewart of was living quietly. In fact, one of his most iconic songs, Maggie May, was reportedly inspired by a real older woman he met during the 1960 Beaulieu Jazz Festival. The story behind that song became part of rock history and added even more mystery to Rod's image as the rebellious heartbreaker who always seemed to live exactly how he wanted. But while fans loved the rock star lifestyle from a distance, the emotional damage behind some of those relationships was far more serious than people realized. Some romances ended badly, some family tensions became public, and over time, the non-stop lifestyle began taking a real toll on Rod physically and emotionally. That is what makes the questions surrounding him today feel so emotional. Fans are not just looking at a legendary singer anymore. They are looking at a man who survived war-era London, poverty, arrests, health scares, failed relationships, public controversies, and decades of non-stop pressure, and somehow kept performing through all of it. Now, as he enters his 80s, many people are quietly wondering how much longer one man can keep carrying a life that intense before the curtain finally comes down. That encounter stayed in Rod Stewart's mind for years, and eventually he transformed it into one of the most famous songs in rock history. What started as a personal memory later became part of music legend. Rod's first marriage was to Alana Hamilton in 1979. At the time, he was 34 years old, which most people would see as the perfect age to settle down. But his father did not see it that way at all. When Rod shared the news, his father reportedly told him he was far too young and should wait another decade before getting married. Even at 34 years old, Rod Stewart was still just a kid in his father's eyes. His second marriage created even more headlines. In 1990, at 45 years old, Rod married model Rachel Hunter, who was 24 years younger than him. The age gap instantly sparked gossip everywhere, including inside his own family. Rod's sister Mary openly predicted the relationship would end badly and warned that Rachel would eventually break his heart. Sadly for Rod, that prediction eventually came true. After 9 years together, Rachel left the marriage, and people close to Rod said the split hit him hard. Even Elton John could not resist joking about the relationship. As a wedding gift, Elton reportedly sent Rod a Boots gift voucher with a message telling him to buy yourself something nice. Sharp, brutal, and funny all at once. But Rod's third marriage became the one that finally lasted. He married Penny Lancaster, and surprisingly, the age gap was even bigger this time, around 27 years. The two first met in the late 1990s after Rod hired Penny, who was then trying to build a career in photography, to take pictures during one of his tours. Rod later admitted that part of the reason he asked for Penny's phone number was actually to irritate Rachel during a rough period in their relationship. Not exactly the most romantic beginning, but somehow it worked out in the end. Years later, Rod proposed to Penny at the top of the Eiffel Tower in 2005, turning the moment into something straight out of a movie. They officially married in Italy in 2007, surrounded by luxury, celebrity friends, and massive media attention. Still, even this relationship faced painful moments behind the scenes. At one point, Penny reportedly walked out, and the couple briefly split for 2 weeks. Rod was said to be absolutely crushed by it. He became so emotional during that period that he asked Penny for a framed photo of herself so he could look at it before sleeping and again when he woke up each morning. The heartbreak reportedly inspired him to write the song, "Picture in a Frame." But emotional struggles were not the only hardship they faced together. Before welcoming their youngest son, Penny suffered 2 miscarriages, something that deeply affected both of them. The losses were heartbreaking, and after struggling for years, the couple eventually turned to IVF treatment in hopes of having a child together. Now, at 81 years old, Rod Stewart is married to a woman in her mid-50s, and according to Penny, the relationship has actually grown even more passionate over time. She recently admitted that the romantic side of their marriage has become stronger as the years pass rather than fading away. That confession quickly grabbed headlines because some insiders reportedly worry Rod still pushes himself too hard despite his age. Some people close to the couple have even quietly expressed concerns about the pressure intense stress and excitement could place on his health. Rod Stewart's family life is just as complicated as his love life. He has 8 children with 5 different women, creating a family tree so large that even fans sometimes struggle to keep up. His oldest child is already in her 60s while his youngest is still a teenager. That means his oldest child is old enough to be the parent of his youngest child. It is the kind of situation only a rock legend like Rod Stewart could somehow make look normal. Over the years, Rod openly admitted he made mistakes as a father and partner, but after decades of drama, arguments, and emotional ups and downs, he claims he finally learned one important rule for relationships: never argue after drinking wine. Leave serious conversations until the morning. Simple advice, but apparently it took him decades to fully understand it. For all the chaos in his personal life, one thing always remained constant: his voice. That rough, raspy sound became one of the most recognizable voices in music history. It carried him through heartbreak, fame, scandals, and sold-out tours for decades. But then came the terrifying moment when he nearly lost everything. For a singer, the voice is not just important. It is everything. It is their identity, their career, and the thing separating them from every other person who once dreamed of standing on stage. Rod Stewart built his entire career around that unmistakable sound, the voice behind classics like Maggie May and Tonight's the Night. Then, in 2000, his entire world suddenly changed. Rod went to Cedars-Sinai Medical Center in Los Angeles expecting nothing more than a routine medical checkup. He thought he would walk in, get examined, and continue life as normal a few hours later. Instead, doctors discovered something terrifying during a CAT scan. They found a tumor growing on his thyroid gland. This was not some tiny issue doctors could casually monitor. The growth required immediate surgery, and Rod suddenly found himself facing a life-changing medical emergency with almost no time to mentally prepare. One day he felt perfectly healthy. The next day, doctors were warning him that one wrong move during surgery could permanently destroy his singing voice forever. The tumor was dangerously close to the nerve controlling his voice box. Surgeons explained the risks very clearly. If the nerve was damaged even slightly, the effects could become permanent. Rod Stewart could survive the operation but lose the ability to ever sing again. Imagine hearing that after building a career spanning 3 decades. Every hit song, every packed stadium, every emotional performance, every fan singing along, all of it suddenly depended on the steadiness of a surgeon's hand. Rod entered the operating room fully aware that he might wake up as a completely different person. Thankfully, the surgery itself was successful. Doctors removed the tumor, and Rod survived cancer. But what followed afterward became a nightmare nobody had prepared him for. The operation left his throat muscles badly affected, and Rod later described the feeling as if his voice had forgotten how to sing. He could still speak normally. He could laugh, hold conversations, and yell if he wanted to. But when he tried to sing, the sound would not come out correctly anymore. Doctors originally promised his voice should recover within 6 months. But 6 months passed, and nothing improved. Then 7 months passed, Still nothing. Rod watched time slipping away while fear slowly took over his mind. Every week felt like another step closer to the end of his career. When he tried singing Maggie May instead of hearing the legendary voice fans knew, he reportedly heard only painful croaking sounds coming out. What made it even crueler was how sudden everything happened. Only months earlier, Rod had been performing confidently in front of massive crowds, feeding off the energy of thousands of fans singing every word back to him. There had been no warning signs, no slow decline, no hints his voice was about to betray him so suddenly. One year he was dominating arenas as a rock icon. The next year, he seriously considered starting a completely different career in landscaping because he feared music was over forever. Rod later admitted he believed his entire life and career were about to disappear right in front of him. The tours, the albums, the screaming fans, and the superstar life Rod Stewart spent decades building suddenly felt like they were slipping away from him. A tumor had grown dangerously close to the nerve controlling his voice, and even though surgeons did everything they could, Rod feared the damage had already been done forever. At one point, he became so convinced his music career was over that he started planning a completely different future. Rod even looked into opening a landscape gardening business in Beverly Hills because he truly believed he might never perform again. But the hardest part was not the surgery or the scar on his neck. The worst part was the silence. For the first time in his adult life, Rod Stewart could not sing. He could not sing around the house, sing to his children, or even hum along with songs on the radio. The one thing that had always come naturally to him suddenly disappeared. Rod later admitted that period terrified him, not because he feared dying, but because he could not imagine living without music anymore. After 9 frustrating months, Rod stopped listening to the doctor's recovery timelines. He cleared out his garage, brought musicians over, and started screaming and pushing his voice as hard as he could, trying to force it back. It was not safe or medically approved, but Rod felt he had nothing left to lose. Slowly, little by little, the voice finally started returning. That experience changed him forever. Before the surgery, Rod assumed singing would always be there. After nearly losing it, he realized how fragile life really was. Fame can disappear overnight, and no amount of money or celebrity status can protect somebody from devastating news inside a hospital room. One routine scan nearly erased everything. Sadly, that health nightmare turned out to be only the beginning. Years later, Rod Stewart's body was hiding another devastating secret. In 2017, during a routine checkup, doctors discovered he had aggressive prostate cancer. The frightening part was that Rod did not even feel sick. He had no warning signs and no major symptoms before hearing the diagnosis that completely shook his world. Rod was still touring and performing while privately dealing with a disease that could potentially end his life. What shocked people even more was how secretive he became about it. He did not tell the public, reporters, or even his own children. Only a very small inner circle knew the truth, because Rod did not want his family panicking until he knew whether he would survive. That meant he had to continue smiling for cameras, answering questions about concerts, and acting like everything was normal while privately wondering if he was running out of time. More tests were needed, and the waiting became torture. Penny Lancaster suffered beside him in silence because she could not openly talk about the diagnosis either. While cameras flashed at public events, she secretly carried the fear that her husband might be dying. After surgery, Rod focused almost immediately on planning future tour dates instead of breaking down emotionally. That was his way of coping. If he could not control the cancer, he would control everything else around it. At one point, Rod promised Penny he still had another 20 years left to live. No doctor had guaranteed that. He simply said it because both of them needed hope. But Penny later admitted the secrecy nearly destroyed her emotionally. She became severely depressed during that period and later described antidepressants as a life raft that helped her survive mentally. She also revealed she once spent 3 straight hours crying during a therapy session because of the overwhelming fear and pressure. That is what serious illness does to families. It spreads fear through everybody who loves the person suffering. Finally, in July 2019, Rod Stewart received the news he had desperately hoped for. Doctors told him he was clear and the aggressive cancer was gone. Fans later praised him for speaking publicly about the disease because it encouraged many men to get tested earlier instead of ignoring possible warning signs. After surviving cancer and nearly losing his voice years earlier, Rod developed a much calmer attitude toward life and death. He once joked that when his time finally comes, he plans to go out in a flame of laughter and fun. That statement perfectly captures who Rod Stewart really is. But even after beating cancer, the health struggles still did not stop. Now at 81 years old, Rod Stewart faces a question he spent most of his life avoiding. Can he finally slow down? Rod Stewart has spent more than 60 years refusing to stop. He survived financial struggles, relationship drama, cancer, and the terrifying fear of losing his voice while still continuing to perform in front of massive crowds. But eventually, the human body starts pushing back no matter how determined somebody is. In June 2024, Rod was forced to cancel his huge 200th residency celebration show in Las Vegas after developing strep throat. For younger people, that illness might not seem serious, but for an 80-year-old singer whose career depends entirely on his throat and lungs, it becomes a major concern. Fans immediately started worrying. Only months later, he reportedly caught a respiratory illness that caused even more postponed shows in Nevada and California. Suddenly, the man who once toured non-stop without missing dates was canceling multiple performances in the same year. His body has also started betraying him physically in other ways. Rod eventually stopped playing soccer, one of his lifelong passions, after undergoing knee replacement surgery. To most people, that may sound like a normal part of aging, but for Rod, it symbolized losing a connection to the working-class kid he once was growing up in North London. Still, even at 81 years old, Rod Stewart continues chasing intense goals. He reportedly runs 100 meters in around 19 seconds and wants to lower that time even further. Family members have openly worried he is pushing himself too hard and fear the intense training could seriously affect his heart. Even his workouts sound extreme. Years ago, Frank Sinatra reportedly told Rod that powerful lungs were the secret to becoming a great singer. Rod took that advice seriously. His trainer now throws a brick into the deep end of a pool while Rod dives underwater, pushing it across the bottom before resurfacing. His trainer reportedly described the sessions as almost military-style workouts. And despite the canceled concerts, illnesses, and surgeries, Rod still reportedly has dozens of shows planned throughout 2026 across the United States and Europe. When people ask whether 2026 could finally be the end of his touring career, Rod gives answers that sound both honest and stubborn. He admits nothing lasts forever, but he also says he still genuinely loves performing. That contradiction perfectly explains Rod Stewart. Deep down, he understands he cannot do this forever, but emotionally, he refuses to imagine life without music and live audiences. For his 81st birthday, Rod celebrated with a massive 10-day yacht party and openly admitted it cost an absolute fortune. But he did not care because, as he joked, "You only turn 80 once." That attitude sums him up perfectly. Rod Stewart has always lived loudly, dramatically, and completely on his own terms, and he clearly has no intention of changing now. For years, retirement rumors have followed him after every canceled show, illness, and surgery. Yet Rod's answer always stays the same. He says he will stop only when his voice stops. And somehow, after everything he survived, that voice is still there. What do you think? Should Rod Stewart finally retire? Or does the legend still have one more unforgettable chapter left?